Welcome to the AEI Education Podcast on the AEI Podcast channel. I'm Nat Malkus, resident scholar in education policy at the American Enterprise Institute. Look, our podcast is simple. We bring on guests at the center of research, policy, and practice issues that are affecting families, schools, and students. Today, we have two excellent guests to talk about career and technical education and efforts to bring it to more students. First, I'll talk with Congressman Glenn Thompson, who represents Pennsylvania's 5th Congressional District and who co-sponsored the Carl D. Perkins Act, the federal government's major piece of legislation for career and technical education, which was reauthorized 6 years after it was originally supposed to be. Then we'll talk with Greg Ferenstein, a writer and independent consultant who does work on the future of work and education reform. He'll join me to talk about historical reasons and structural reasons that explain why it's been so difficult for America to have a successful career and technical education system, especially using apprenticeships. Without further ado, let's welcome Representative Glenn Thompson. Representative Glenn Thompson, thank you for joining the AEI Education Podcast.
Nat, thank you so much. Thanks for the opportunity to be here to, talk about, I think, a pretty transformative piece of legislation.
Well, yeah, congratulations on passing Perkins. It's a long time coming, about 6 years. It was due for authorization. And, it's a little funny, I find, how little attention that it's actually gotten. I mean, I was asking a reporter why they thought Perkins had gotten so little ink in the press, and their reply here in D.C. was, well, it's not really that big of a deal. I mean, it's just like $1 billion, right? Well, $1 billion seems like a little bit of an important thing to me. So for those who don't know and are listening, can you tell them a little bit of background? What is the Perkins Act, and how does it help schools and students?
Well, this is a transformative piece of legislation that restores rungs on the ladder of opportunity. And it was disappointing that there was a failure by the media largely to recognize the importance of this. This reauthorizes the Carl D. Perkins Act, which is the act that it provides the authority for supporting career and technical education in our country. And maybe the media's response is because of the bias and the stigma that's been out there now for decades. For the types of jobs that would be impacted by career and technical education, the trades, and that's sad. And it is, and that's one of the goals we had with this reauthorization. It was more than just a reauthorizing, which was long overdue. This was about a modernizing of career and technical education, or what I like to refer to as skills-based education. Including, trying to take some steps to eliminate this bias and the stigma for a tremendous pathway to success in life through these career and technical education programs. And so, yeah, I guess in short, Nat, and we can talk in more details from different aspects of it, but in short, this piece of legislation, which by the way passed 5 times between the House and the Senate.
Right.
Once out of committee in the House, once out of the full House, once out of committee in the Senate, once out of the full Senate, and then it came back to the House where I managed the debate, really to accept the few but outstanding amendments that were made in the Senate. And 5 times of being voted on, this bill passed unanimously each and every time. It really is about increasing access to more effective skills-based education.
Well, CTE does seem to have an uncommon popularity. In fact, it's very hard to find anybody who says, I'm against CTE. But it's also sort of a big, broad concept. It can be sort of hard to get your hands around, even if you are sort of in the weeds of it. So for our listeners, to put a little context around these fuzzy edges, what is it that states and districts and school districts need to do to provide kids with quality CTE or career and technical education?
Yeah, and the cool part in that is just not our kids. It's important for our kids because this is about launching, coming out of a secondary education and for many, and launching successful careers with wages that are family sustaining without without having a debt the size of a mortgage at the end of the day. But this is also for any adult at any point in their life where they're seeking greater opportunity, where they want to. Yeah, we're not talking about 4-year degrees. We're talking about a certification, a specialization,
right?
A set of competencies that they need to achieve, and as a result of that, they can maybe enter the workforce out of poverty, out of multi-generation dependence on welfare, or it's somebody who's looking for a better job, a raise, a little more of a challenge. Whether they're moving to a new employer or, quite frankly, rising on the ladder of opportunity within their current employer. And so, for those who are listening, so you understand how the breadth of and the diversity of skill sets we're talking about. The tools of career and technical education includes, a lot of people think about, and these are important, welders and hammers and wrenches, those types of...
Sure, the classics.
Yeah, it's classic, but it's also, so it is a trade, but it's also stethoscopes, it's paintbrushes, it's agriculture equipment and devices, it's keyboards. I mean, coding is a skills-based education. It is heavy equipment. It is commercial driver's license. The diversity of the tools of career and technical education is pretty amazing. I was just visiting a company this morning in Center County, Pennsylvania, Centroid, and these individuals, what they're doing there with these skills that they have, they're building CNC machines that people are buying these machines and they're manufacturing. The things that they're manufacturing with them is just incredible. But you need people with the skills. You need the qualified and trained workforce. And today it's estimated that the Department of Labor statistics I just looked at determine that as listeners are hearing this podcast, there are 6.7 million jobs open and available that employers cannot find individuals who are qualified and trained. We call that the skills gap.
Right.
This legislation fills the skills gap. And by the way, I think that number, because of this economy, is growing each and every day with job creation.
So you've aptly described CTE as a broad range. It's not just, shop class in high school that a lot of people go to. They sort of think about that vocational ed as CTE. It's much broader than that. And I understand that. Now, to help states in Perkins, you got to struggle with, what's the federal role that's appropriate and measured and can help states deliver that, which is, really, these aren't federal programs, but it's a federal program, it seems to me, to help states deliver CTE to their citizens. And can you talk about a few of the things that are new in this new authorization that specifically help states to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I start with the barriers that have been put up under the traditional program for years. And part of that is the inability to respond to the market force needs. We one of the things that we bring to this Modernization Act is that we bring the people who sign the front of a paycheck to the table, the job creators. These are folks that they know they're, like where I was at Centroid this morning, they know their number one asset is not their business line, it's not their management, it's not their compliance plan to deal with all the excessive regulations that they have to struggle with. It's not their marketing plan, it's their qualified and trained workforce. And so we bring those people to the table, those business owners, with this model, so that the types of programs that we're providing now meet the workforce needs. Now, that could be certainly all the in-demand positions, and part of that is some of the traditional, obviously, positions we've had for decades, but because of the average age of the workforce, through attrition, retirements, we have significant needs there. But we also have the emerging industries, the new opportunities, the entrepreneur who comes up with a great idea, a new idea, and needs a special competency set. Now, in the past, because of the role of the federal government, we could have, and I've seen this many times where we've had employers come into our areas, different areas, and they want to, for whatever reason, they're looking to invest. Maybe they had roots there, or maybe they see potential there, and they want to build or expand a business. But the number one thing they look at is there an availability of qualifying and trained workforce, and they would actually reach out to our whether it's our career and technical education schools, which are many of them are obviously state affiliated, local school districts, but some of them are private entrepreneurs or entities that are out there, are for-profit schools that do a great job of providing access to these skill sets. But unfortunately, the amount of time under the old rules it would take for a school to be able to step up a new training program, the bureaucracy they would have to go through, the lack of flexibility, the lack of nimbleness, those business owners that wanted to invest and create jobs are long gone.
Yeah.
They don't, they're operating much faster than what the government bureaucracy is. Within this piece of legislation, we provide more nimbleness, more flexibility, less Washington, more local and state stakeholders, so that they can respond to these workforce needs, and that speaks to the both greater access and, quite frankly, the greater effectiveness of these types of programs going forward in the future.
So I have a question. I want to ground this a little bit in your district, right? The people that you know the best. I wonder what you've heard sort of both before and what you expect to hear moving forward from, business leaders and the people, as you said, that are signing the front of the paycheck, as to how responsive these programs have been and what are the things that, they are looking for. And part of the reason that I ask this is that, in different counties and different districts, certainly in different states, there's going to be different economic demands for training of different kinds. And my question is, how does this play out on the ground in, thousands of districts across the nation? So what have you heard from folks in your district?
Well, great point. First of all, they appreciate that we've eliminated the one-size-fits-all cookie-cutter approach coming out of Washington. That doesn't work because of all the things you just described, that every area is different, every community, every county has unique opportunities, and you need to be able to have the flexibility and the authority to be able to respond to those needs. I point to one of my counties, Elk County, great county, an amazing and a strong manufacturing base, and this is an incredible manufacturing county, and most people are surprised to hear that. It's very rural Pennsylvania, so it's rural America, but because of the health of the manufacturing there, Elk County, the statistic I just saw was amazing. They're number 26 out of all the counties, not just in Pennsylvania. There are 67 counties in Pennsylvania, but all the counties in the United States. Elk County is number 26 in terms of the number of people that have health insurance, and that is because of the power of work. Why they have that coverage. And so I was in Elk County, and there was a visit. This was just a week or so ago. Elk County Heat Treatment. They're a value-added manufacturing company. They take a product somebody else manufactures, and they add a process to it to improve it. That's a business that has grown. Actually, they just this past year they've purchased 2 additional buildings. That was largely a result of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, that they were able to afford that. And they had 11 employees at the beginning of the year, and today they're at 50.
Wow.
And so you can see what the economy's doing because of, and quite frankly, it's President Trump's leadership, and and what Congress has been doing with peeling away the layers of inefficient, ineffective regulations, and with the Tax Cuts and the Jobs Act, what that has done. But that would be for nothing if they can't find people to fill those jobs. And that's where, talking with the owner, Ben, I mean, he's going to continue to grow in this economy that we're in, that's creating these opportunities for folks. And in the end, that's why this legislation was so important, because it is responsive to business owners like Ben and his wife who own these entrepreneurs that own this company, and most companies I find they have job openings, and they're not able to fill them largely because of the skills gap. I'm hoping that what we've done with the career and technical education reauthorization or legislation really will close that skills gap.
Well, let me ask you a little bit about some of the things that we sometimes differ over in the legislative process. And one of those is the role of the Department of Education. Of course, the Department of Education sort of has to be the machinery through which Perkins funds get out to states and so forth. But, before the Every Student Succeeds Act, of course, the Secretary of Education had a lot more power than after it. What authority does the Secretary have in sort of monitoring compliance with these? Because, we're spending $1 billion. So I want to make sure that money goes to good programs and not lousy ones. On the other hand, I don't want to tie locals' hands. So can you tell me, how does Perkins deal with that authority? And how is the back and forth over that issue while developing this reauthorization?
Well, in the end, it was less Washington, more local and state stakeholders. That was an area of contention with the Senate. The Senate was, we were, but we're all in agreement that that's the direction we wanted to go in, and we wanted to model that after what we have done. Two great victories, basically, for helping people be able to get the type of education to be able to secure these jobs, to take some partial steps to fill the skills gap. One goes back to the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, right, that we passed. I helped with part of that. I'm a senior member on the Education Workforce Committee, and that was definitely a model that broke the typical mold. We went less Washington, more local, more state authority. Then after that, as you mentioned, we repealed No Child Left Behind. We did away with the Common Core mandate from the federal government, and we replaced that with the Every Student Succeeds Act. And that, again, was really the same model of less Washington, less cookie-cutter solutions, and more local solutions that actually work, because these folks know what the issues are that they're dealing with. And so it was in that spirit that we did do the career and technical education bill. And so so in the end, we did wind up with a model that does allow more flexibility, more nimbleness to be able to adjust to workforce needs. And that's what education should be about. The role of the federal government for education really is about the rural economy. And it's about making sure that we have it's about the American economy, which includes rural and urban. And the number one asset there is making sure that America has a continuing supply of qualified and trained workers, so that our private sector can do what it's supposed to do, drive the American economy. And so I think we've achieved that with this piece of legislation, and it's in the spirit of the past couple of major pieces of legislation that have come out of the Education Workforce Committee.
Yeah, there's certainly some consistency there. I think there's a lot of things. There's too much in Perkins to sort of go over. It is, just to briefly reiterate some of the things that I think are interesting, is how the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, or WIOA, and ESSA sort of planning terms and core definitions have been aligned into Perkins. I think that's good. I was excited to see that it doubled the percentage of funds that can go to correctional CTE to reduce recidivism and help the incarcerated population, adapt to life outside of prison. There's just a number of things. But one of the questions that I have is, what changes are there with this innovation fund and the disaggregated data that are in this bill that might help us to learn things after Perkins about CTE that before this reauthorization we might not have been able to study or sort of get at the granular level that we need to kind of efficiently set up CTE programs that will help build the kind of workforce that local employers and economies need?
Well, I think it really looks. We try to make the collection of data be such that it supports the mission, the purpose behind this legislation, which is having a qualified and trained workforce, meeting the needs of our job creators, and also creating opportunities again by restoring rungs on the ladder of opportunity. Many times in the past, the government bureaucrats love collecting data. And they collect data that's never used. And that comes at a cost. That compliance cost of record keeping can be significant on employers and on schools, whether they're for-profit or non-profit government-related education and training centers. And so one of the things we tried to do is to make the data that is collected, because you had remarked to that. You had referenced that, we have a fiduciary duty to the American taxpayers, to make sure that, if there's that the cost of that they're supporting and they're funding through their taxes, that it's efficient government and it's the right type of thing.
Sure.
So we have tried to reduce the amount of data that's wasteful, that just has no use whatsoever other than driving up the compliance costs of our providers of this skills-based education. And in the end, that we're collecting data that helps us make smart decisions going into the future. And so those are the kinds of things we've done. We've, obviously some really kind of a return to a day of apprenticeships, looking at efficient models of delivering this type of education. We're, some of it's not necessarily tied to bricks and mortar of the typical type of what we would call a vocational training center or a career and technical education center. Some of it is strengthening relationship with these business owners, these employers, and promoting, once again, returning to a day of apprenticeships. It was apprenticeships in our secondary schools, our high schools, that built many of the strong businesses and industries we have today. I mentioned Elk County. That particular business is within the chain of powdered metals, and so I have the honor of representing probably what is the world epicenter of powdered metals. These a couple of very rural counties in north central Pennsylvania. And when you look back historically, how those companies were able to develop, it was a result of decades ago, generations ago, of a strong apprenticeship relationship with our secondary schools. Well, we couldn't, prior to this most recent reauthorization, we lost all that.
Right.
Very weak. It was amazing what we did. And part of that was because of this false pretense that everyone has to go to a 4-year college. And that's what has been supported by administrations of both parties literally for decades. And it is important. I mean, access to college, post-secondary college is a good thing for some people, and I work hard to make that affordable and accessible. But that is not the only pathway to success in life. So the restoration of strong apprenticeship programs is a part of this.
Yeah, well, apprenticeships certainly are important, and probably important enough for us to have a whole other podcast on them. So we may try and get you back on then to talk more. We got time for one more question, and I know that one bill is never the perfect solution, and I just wonder from your perspective if you could talk about something that might have been on the cutting room floor that you had hoped in the bill, or what you think needs to be done to increase and access to quality CTE beyond what's in this bill, which is a step forward, but not certainly game, set, and match. And who do you think needs to take those steps?
Well, Nat, you raise a great point. I mean, we do our best with these pieces of legislation. I think this one, because of how I brought everyone to the table, employers, parents, kids, career and technical education faculty, administration. I think we've done well with this, but you never get it. There's always parts that do better than others. And so I learned a long time ago, it's not good enough to write what I would consider righteous pieces of legislation that that will be successful. You have to provide oversight, quite frankly, on the unelected bureaucrats who will now be writing the rules and the regulations to get this implemented.
Right.
And I've learned that over my time of service in Congress. And so, and this is my commitment with career and technical education, to still be engaged with this. I co-chair one of the largest bipartisan caucuses in Congress with Jim Langevin. He's a member of Congress. I'm the Republican. He's the Democrat from Rhode Island. This is a bipartisan issue, and we're going to lead this caucus to provide oversight on starting with Washington, the bureaucrats there, and then I know for myself personally, I like to keep an eye on the Department of Education in Pennsylvania to make sure that they follow the intent of Congress, the intent and the spirit of which we wrote this legislation. Because I have seen great legislation hijacked at the executive branch level, both the federal and the state in the past. And so I think that's the primary thing right now. I guess I would offer is a commitment to oversight, and in doing that, we're going to find things that maybe could have been improved upon, or new opportunities, or things that we shouldn't have done by exercising that part of the checks and balances that is within our form of government.
Well, you're in the right caucus and on the right committee to do it. So best of luck doing that oversight. Glenn Thompson, thank you again for sharing a little bit of time with us to talk about the Perkins reauthorization.
Now, my pleasure. Thanks so much.
After talking with Congressman Glenn Thompson about the reauthorization of the Perkins Act, we wanted to talk more generally about CTE and where its struggles and challenges lie, and opportunities as well. So we sat down with Greg Ferenstein, a writer and independent consultant who's done work on the future of work and education reform, to talk about CTE and the historical reasons why it's been so difficult for America to revive apprenticeships and deliver effective CTE. Greg Ferenstein, welcome to AEI Education Podcast.
Glad to be on with you guys.
Well, thanks, Greg. Hey, let's just start out thinking about CTE generally speaking. You've written about this some. I wanted to ask you, what do you think are some of the key structural problems that has made it difficult for CTE to be successful or seen as successful?
Just to give you a little bit of background, over the last year, I've been looking at the history of why college became the default path to workforce training. Apprenticeships didn't go away in America because they stopped working. They went away as a political compromise between labor unions and business executives in the late 19th and early 20th century who couldn't agree on how much to pay workers in training, because businesses wanted apprenticeships to kind of replace more expensive senior workers. So what they did was they made a political compromise that taxpayers would start paying for vocational training. And that spiraled into a culture of where you went to school to get job experience rather than the job itself. And the government has continued that monopoly by supporting schools as workforce trainers. They are not. The best job training happens at businesses.
Yeah, well, certainly the liberal arts foundations of universities are sort of the fundamentals. And there's a lot of folks who would say, yeah, what you learn in college is not actually workforce training. Are there folks that are saying, this is a machine for workforce training? Or do you think it's that they just don't have a sense of what other institutions might deliver that?
Well, so it used to be apprenticeships for, thousands of years. At least going back to the Macedonians, apprenticeships were the way in which people developed high-skilled professions. Now, you usually had one profession for your entire life, but apprenticeships were the way probably most people got into a non-agricultural profession up until the 20th century in America, too.
And, Greg, other countries still use apprenticeships, right?
Most countries have gone to the college system. The
Right.
only country where I think a majority of people do apprenticeships is Switzerland.
Right.
And the United States is trying to copy them. The governor of Colorado, John Hickenlooper, has made a statewide initiative to more or less copy the Swiss experience because it's been so successful. I think Germany is up there as well.
Now, you've written some on how aspirational jobs that families want their kids to pursue in prestigious areas, medicine, law, finance, technology, business, a lot of these are all gate kept by, requirements to go to a 4-year institution. And the current definition of CTE has been sort of broadened to say, in high school, we need to deliver career and technical education. And that can go straight to, careers through vocational style education in high school, or by developing kids' sense of career that can follow them through college. What do you think this means for CTE? And as we see sort of Perkins is reauthorized, I don't know if it's a fundamental reorganization of anything related to CTE, but I'm curious how the connection of aspirational jobs through CTE is going to affect how future CTE programs provide students in high school with direct on-ramps to the workforce.
So what I've argued is that unless the most aspirational employers and most aspirational colleges start adopting apprenticeship-style models, you're just not going to see kids adopt them. So for 100 years, America has been trying to get more students into CTE. They have systematically rejected that because it's a second-tier pathway. Most parents want their kids to go to Stanford or work at Google. Well, the United States federal government has set up a system whereby they heavily subsidize education through loans, and then the employers don't have to spend a lot of time educating them because it's either subsidized through debt or the federal government. So the employers are getting pre-trained workers, and that pre-training happens in the top schools. And the way we have it in high school is you have to choose to take AP classes when you're a freshman or a sophomore to even have a chance to get into those pathways. Until it's possible for kids to apply to the best occupations and the best employers without having to go through college, they're just not going to choose vocational schooling.
Greg, I'm curious about what's going on across the states. I mean, we have 50 states. Lots of different opportunities for different approaches to CTE rise up. Are there any places across the nation that we see sort of signs of CTE success, or is it just a dismal landscape across the country?
Oh, there's a ton of really cool programs. I mean, Lorraine Jobs, Powell is funding all of these cool schools that do shop classes and programming. There's P-Tech High School in New York, which was highlighted by the White House recently, which has an extra year tacked on to high school, and you get kind of an associate's degree in a technical training field, and then IBM is partnered with these P-Tech high schools. So after you get your 5th year of high school associate's degree, you get preferential hiring at IBM. There is just so many cool high schools all around the country doing wonderful practical training. There's a video game school in LA called, I believe, Game Desk, although that's a little earlier than high school. So yeah, practical shop, programming, technical training is happening all over the country. It is systematically disappearing every time it gets tried out because students know that they have to take 10 AP courses to get into college.
So, Greg, in the news this week, I saw that Google and I believe it was Apple and several other companies had announced around the same time, we're not going to require our employees as a condition of employment to have a BA anymore. Is that the kind of crack, the kind of structural shift that can open the door for more apprenticeship programs, or is that just addressing another need, just opening up the kinds of jobs that these tech companies need for kids who can do the tech work without actually having gone for a BA degree?
So I think it's super important, and the tech companies have an enormous amount of influence on whether CTE training can be successful. So I think not requiring a college degree and not even looking at the college degree in the application process is a necessary first step. The next step has to be whether they actually recruit kids who never went to college, because the most talented people are going to Harvard and Yale, and Harvard and Yale and the rest of the colleges refuse to have an apprenticeship system where you get work experience while you're going to school. So while it's a good first step, unless the tech companies also hire people who didn't actually go to college, it will end up just being a token gesture.
Greg Ferenstein, with a tall order for fixing CTE, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Happy to be on.
Thank you for listening to the AEI Education Podcast on the AEI Podcast channel. And special thanks to our guests, Congressman Glenn Thompson and Greg Ferenstein. You can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or your favorite podcast player. And if you enjoyed the podcast, don't forget to rate and review us on iTunes or Google. One thing to note, we are looking for a new name. If you have any suggestions for what our permanent name should be, send it to ed.podcast@aei.org. You'll get a shout out in the episode that we announce our new name if your suggestion is chosen. If you have any other comments, questions, or topic suggestions for future episodes, reach out and tell us at ed.podcast@aei. Signing off for today, I'm Nat Malkus.